Thank you so much for this opportunity to share our approach of tapestry thinking with each of you. As a scientist, an ecologist in academia, my primary question has been, how do we understand our world? There are many ways of knowing: intuition, traditional indigenous ways, aesthetic, religious, and scientific. For 4 decades, I've used the thread of science to understand the dynamics and health and conservation of forests, which to me are tapestries of organisms and interactions that are like real tapestries. They're complex, connected, strong, useful, and beautiful. And today I'll use the metaphor of tapestry and the approach of what I call tapestry thinking to interweave threads of science and society to better care for people and our planet. First, I'll present the ecological value of forest canopies. Second, I'll describe how we've woven those values into other societal values to enhance conservation. And third, I'll share some of the best practices of this approach with you. My own family background has helped me be a weaver of different entities. My father is from India, a Hindu and a scientist. My mother was of Russian parentage, an Orthodox Jew who studied languages. So I learned that mixing cultures can be rich and harmonious. And as a child, I found great joy and refuge in climbing trees. And then I took a solemn oath that when I became a grown-up, I would do something to protect trees. Well, I chose to pursue the study of forests and focused on the little explored forest canopy. I used mountain climbing techniques for non-destructive access to the treetops of my rainforest treetop study sites in Costa Rica and Washington State. In my 4 decades of research, my colleagues and I have documented that the canopy supports a tremendous diversity of animals and plants, which play critical ecological roles to whole forests. Canopy plants intercept and retain nutrients that are derived from atmospheric sources, minerals that are dissolved in rainfall and mist. This augments the nutrient pools and flows of the whole forest. They also provide critical food and energy and nesting materials for arboreal mammals and birds. So these ecological values can form the vertical threads of the whole forest tapestry. But many human activities are now damaging this intact tapestry: climate change, forest fragmentation, and the isolation of individual trees. And this coincides with a more profound disturbance, the increasing isolation of humans from nature, which accompanies our growing urbanization. So as a scientist and as a person, I felt I needed to go beyond only contributing to the scientific record. And I've chosen to raise public awareness of the importance of forests, focusing on audiences that do not or cannot gain easy access to nature or nature education in traditional learning venues. So I've really shifted my primary question to this: how do we understand and communicate in a world of increasing disturbance? Well, my own connection to trees happened as a little girl, taking that oath to protect trees. But a youngster growing up in New York City or Nairobi or Tokyo might not have the opportunity to climb trees. So what other values might young girls already hold that I could piggyback the values of understanding trees? Well, many young girls value Barbie. So I thought that a treetop Barbie would provide a role model to inspire canopy exploration into the next generation. And in 2004, I contacted Mattel, the company that makes Barbies, but they were not interested. So my students and I made our own Barbies. We bought used dolls. We engaged volunteer seamstresses to sew her field clothes. We accompanied her with a pamphlet on canopy plants, and we disseminated them on my tiny little academic website. But happily, in 2021, inspired by our Treetop Barbie, Mattel and National Geographic partnered to create a line of real explorer Barbies. I advised on the project, and they created a one-of-a-kind Nalini lookalike Barbie as thanks. I think this whole thing is very hopeful, as it indicates that many little girls now aspire to work or appreciate those who work to explore and protect the tapestry of nature. Well, this experience led me to understand that people will engage with and take care of what they already value, not necessarily what I value. It could be their sports car or an engagement ring or their church or a forest. So I built a conceptual loom with the vertical threads of those ecological values of nature, and I learned that I could weave the recreational values of Barbie to establish a stronger fabric of the care for trees. So I'll now describe the ways that we've interwoven the ecological values of nature with other values of societal sectors outside of ecology, spiritual and religious values, and social justice values. I'll start with religious values. Well, to avoid past conflicts between science and religion, like the unresolvable debate of evolution versus creationism, I decided to use religious authorities rather than scientific authorities in my approach. I read the holy scriptures of the world religions and identified all the references to trees and forests in those writings and used those as my database. For example, in the Old Testament, starting on page 1 with the tree of life, I found there are 328 references to trees and forests. All of them describe the positive roles that trees provide to their followers. I also explored the many religious rituals and celebrations that involve trees. Jews celebrate Tu B'Shavat, the New Year for trees. Buddha found enlightenment under a Bodhi tree. Followers of Islam often find the form of the name Allah in tree branches. And in the Book of Mormon, we read about the tree with white fruits, which is a symbol of the love of God for his followers. To acquaint myself with the communication protocols in places of worship, I spent 2 months attending church services, sitting in the back pew, and I learned about the length of sermons, the responsiveness of congregants, the presence of music, and the desire to contribute. Most importantly, I saw that congregants were friendly and open to me, even though I was not of their faith. So I wrote and delivered my sermon on trees and spirituality in over 40 places of worship and was received without conflict because I had used their authorities rather than mine. We've also created instructive pamphlets with ecological and scriptural information about the species of trees that grow in the sacred ground of churchyards, which we then distribute to congregants. These activities have led to tree plantings and bio-blitzes on church grounds and giving lectures in seminaries about the importance of nature conservation. This led to my speaking about ecological justice with the Archbishop of Canterbury, the religious leader of 85 million Anglicans and Episcopalians around the world. So these are some of the ways that we've connected ecological and religious values. Well, what about social justice values? I find that the people who have the least access to nature, to information about nature, and to the ability to contribute to the conservation of nature are the 2 million adults and 50,000 youth who are currently incarcerated in our country. They live and work in environments that are almost entirely devoid of nature. So in 2004, my colleagues and I started a program to bring science lectures inside prisons and jails in Washington state, which we've replicated in Utah and other states across the country, a program called Inspire. Our former evaluations, with oversight from our institutional review board, has documented that the people who are incarcerated who hear our lectures significantly increase their science knowledge content. They shift their self-identity to being science learners. They wish to seek out more information about research topics, and they want to share this information with others, their cellmates, and their families. We've also provided opportunities for people who are incarcerated to contribute to ongoing ecological restoration projects inside correctional institutions, rearing the Oregon spotted frog, the Taylor checker spot butterfly, growing rare prairie plants, and building nesting boxes for the American kestrel. Since 2019, we've carried out these same activities with youth in custody in juvenile detention centers in Utah. We've also documented the impacts of these programs on participating scientists and conservationists. These academics significantly shift their perception of incarcerated people to more positive directions. Many have joined Black Lives Matter and written to their elected officials to urge increased funding for correctional education. So academic actions woven into non-traditional venues can lead to social justice attitudes and actions. Now, we well understand that these actions do not erase or correct the deeply ingrained injustices in the system of mass incarceration. But they do interweave two very separated societal sectors, academia and corrections, in ways that are beneficial to both and to ecological restoration of the earth. So these are just some of the threads that we've woven into the tapestry of care for our planet. There are numerous other values that can further strengthen this: aesthetic values, historical, cultural, and economic values. Now, what I'd like to do is to share 5 practices about tapestry thinking that might be of use to you and others. First, I recognize that it takes time and effort to create these interweavings that have impact. For example, my work with faith-based groups started very small, with me just reading scriptures and visiting churches. But that led to conversations with influential religious leaders. And it took 2 decades to build the trust that is needed to build relationships with sectors outside my own. Second, it's important to recognize that collective actions that generate small-scale, person-to-person interactions are of value. We have 325 million people in the United States, 6.2 million scientists. So I calculated that if each of us converses with just 52 people a year, that's just 1 person a week, we will have connected with everyone in our country. An example is my own experience is to get a manicure requesting the images of trees painted on my fingernails with bright green fingernail polish. This opened the opportunity to engage with young people who notice and value nail decorations, which opened up great conversation about trees for about 2 or 3 weeks until the paint chips off. Third, it's important to document and disseminate this work to spread best practices. And it's important to do this not only in the modes that reach people in your own sectors, but in communications that are aimed at people in other societal sectors. We've published in scientific and ecological journals, but also in corrections journals that prison wardens and officers read, and in religious journals that ministers read, and in other journals that are completely outside of academia, like Playboy. It's also important to carry out engagement events that draw upon existing community networks and in their venues. For example, a wildlife biologist gave a presentation about his research as part of a regular hunter education class at a local rifle shooting range. So it was inclusive to hunters who might not visit a university seminar, and the hunters provided the biologist with their own insights about the distribution of deer. And finally, but perhaps most important, I have found it critical to apply what philosophers call intellectual humility. In all of these encounters, I had to put aside for the moment my own precepts and my own assumptions enough to truly listen, to truly hear what the other group articulated as their values. Even though I resist Barbie myself, and I'm not a religious person and have never been incarcerated, I was able to set aside my own prejudices and experiences to engage with these groups. I call this hope, humility for others' perspectives through engagement. My final question about tapestry thinking is, who sits at the loom to create and sustain this tapestry? Well, I've shown you a few of the people and entities that I've discovered: Barbie, clergy, people who are incarcerated, and manicurists. But I believe that there's an infinity of other weavers, including those at Nova, who can take the shuttle of threads of different colors and textures to help weave understanding and interactions with humility to create this tapestry of care for our planet, something that is complex and connected, that is useful and strong and beautiful. And with that, as we move into this amazing conference that the Nova Institute has assembled, I look forward to learning more about the efforts of all of the presenters and their colleagues to do this. Thank you.